Pannerselvam sir. Well, I don't need we need no introduction really for Pannerselvam sir, because he is greatly known, is largely known throughout India and abroad, and I don't think there's a necessity for introducing him. We had a beautiful lecture by Professor Pannerselvam sir in Philosophy Family on Vedanta and analysis, and it was a very nice lecture wherein many new thoughts came in, and we're really thankful that Professor Pannerselvam again accepted our request, and he's with Richard Rorty'S methodology, which we'll be discussing with us today. And again, this is a new topic, and many people do not actually have not read Richard Rorty, and maybe the philosophy, the members in Philosophy Family would be greatly benefited by his talk. Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Most respected Professor Narayan Rao Garu, Professor Maharana, Professor Pramod Kumar Das ji, my good friend Professor Balganapati, Professor Anirima, Professor Anil Tiwari, Professor Kalyani ji, Professor Ranjit Ghosh ji, my good friend Professor Shamshwar Prasad, my good friend Professor Shivani Sharma ji, Professor Alok Tandon, Dr. Srinivasan, and many others. I always appreciate the way in which the Philosophy Family has been organizing wonderful programs for the benefit of young as well as senior scholars. In fact, I must tell you in this context that the contribution made by the Philosophy Family with various topics is something really remarkable, and I have learned a lot, especially some of the great scholars. Now, for example, Pramod Kumar Das ji, whenever he talks about, whenever he raises some questions or some observations, it is very really thought-provoking, as we have seen today also. And also my good friend Narayan Rao sir is also a very well-known philosopher, and he has been talking about various issues. And I took my special privilege, I should say, to talk in this meet, Philosophers Family, because this gives me a lot of scope for me to improve my lecture or my thoughts. Today, I would be discussing with you one of the important thinkers of the 20th century, that is Richard Rorty, and his concept of solidarity. Whether it is solidarity or objectivity, that is the question which he raises. And finally, he embraces solidarity, and he says that is very important. So I am using his methodology or his paradigm to understand how his philosophical discourse could be very much useful in the 21st century. Let me give a very brief background in which he has emerged. He was born on 1931 on October 4th and died in June 8th, 2007. He's a well-known American philosopher, of course, like John Dewey, and he studied at the University of Chicago and Yale, and he is one of the contemporary analytical philosopher, and he taught at Princeton University, University of Virginia, and later at Stanford University. One of the important aspects which we have to take into account while discussing Richard Rorty is the divide between the Anglo-Saxon philosophy on the one side and the continental philosophy on the other. Now, this divide has created a big rift among the philosophers throughout the globe. Student of philosophy, I don't want to call myself as philosopher. As a student of philosophy, I would always support the continental philosophical discourse for the main reason that it has a concern for human being and it has a concern for human values like freedom and then solidarity and many other concepts. In fact, I should say that I started my philosophical career as a student of analytic philosophy because I was more interested in Wittgenstein when I was a student, and my PhD thesis was on Wittgenstein. But later, I moved away from Wittgenstein, and I felt, I may be wrong also, I felt that the contemporary continental philosophers, starting from Sartre, their contribution is something remarkable for the main reason that they have a direct connection with that of the social problem or society. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a divide between the Anglo-Saxon philosophy and the continental philosophy. In the Anglo-Saxon philosophy, of course, we come across the very great thinkers like Wittgenstein, especially I'm referring to later Wittgenstein, P.F. Strawson, Gilbert Ryle, Davidson, Kripke, and many others. Now, their focus of attention, I would say, is to discuss the problem of meaning, for example, or the concept of reference or the concept of truth, thus giving a very significant importance to language. No doubt, this is a very important consideration which we have to take because after the emergence of this logical positivism, it is felt that philosophers can despise metaphysics. So this is one of the important contributions to the Anglo-Saxon philosophy, but the continental philosophers are directly connected to society, as I mentioned just now, and their concern for society is something remarkable because all of us know thinkers like Sartre talk about human freedom, and later this is extended to thinkers like Brentano, Morley-Ponty, then Heidegger, and many others, Husserl, Gadamer, RICARD, Habermas, and others. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that though our thinker, whom we are going to discuss, that is Richard Rorty, was mainly concerned about contemporary analytical philosophy, if you read his later writings, you can see how he has moved from this contemporary analytical philosophy to continental philosophy. Because some of the issues which he has discussed along with thinkers like Derrida, Habermas, and Heidegger, and others, could easily show that he is more concerned about the social problems. That is going to be my focus. So, though this the tension that exists between, the continental as well as the Anglo-Saxon is very much prevalent, there are some thinkers like Richard Rorty tries to bridge a gap between these two, but in spite of that, I would call him as a thinker who supported a continental philosophical discourse. And this unity or this trying to show the bridge between these two disciplines, discipline in the sense the Anglo-Saxon and continental, was attempted by thinkers like Searle, for example. Searle's well-known book, The Rediscovery of Mind, is an attempt to bridge the phenomenological understanding of mind with that of the philosophical understanding of mind or the analytical understanding of mind. So what I'm trying to say is that he started his philosophical career as the contemporary analytical philosophy, he was more concerned about some of the issues which has bothered human being. I would like to quote some of his important books. Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature is a very important book published in the year 1979, and later Consequences of Pragmatism in 82, Contingency, Irony and Solidarity, 1989, then Objectivity, Relativism and Truth, that is his Philosophical Papers Volume 1, published in 1990, then Essays on Heidegger and Others, that is published in 1995, then Achieving Our Country, that is 97, then Philosophy and Social Hope, and later The Linguistic Turn. These are some of the important works of Richard Rorty. He is quite often known as an American new pragmatist. I would like to make a distinction between the traditional pragmatic approach and the new pragmatic approach. In the new pragmatic approach, we can see how meaning of words is a result of how they are used. And there are many thinkers whom we can place in this category. Of course, John Dewey is a pragmatist, but following him, we have great thinkers like Derrida, and then we can also place Hilary Putnam, then Quine, Donald Davidson, Nicholas, Rescher, Habermas, and many others. Though some of them, they don't call themselves as new pragmatists, we can place them under this category for the main reason that they were showing their opposition to some extent with that of the pragmatism that was developed by Dewey and others. So the new pragmatists have a concern for the society, and they have given a new methodology for understanding the meaning of words and how they are used in language. So we have to take into account the contribution made by Richard Rorty in the context of his new pragmatic approach. So he is a one who has contributed substantially, not only for philosophy, but for literature and cultural studies, political theory, and social science. So he's a versatile scholar, I would say, because he's a one who could throw light on different fields of research. And it should be pointed out here that no American philosopher in the second half of the 20th century received such an intense mixture of consternation, enthusiasm, hostility, and confusion like Richard Rorty. In fact, his book, Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, is considered by a journal, American journal, which listed it as one of the 50 worst books published in the 20th century. This is a criticism. Similarly, his book, Achieving Our Own Country, was criticized by many because in it, there is a contempt for the country. I would like to quote his beautiful quotation from Achieving Our Own Country, Achieving Our Country, wherein he says, I quote Rorty, national pride is to countries what self-respect is to individuals, a necessary condition for self-improvement. Too much national pride can produce bellicosity and imperialism, just as excessive self-respect can produce arrogance. This is what he says in his well-known book, Achieving Our Country. Now, his debate, why we appreciate Richard Rorty, is for the main reason that he has debated on various issues like knowledge, truth, ethics, politics, and whatnot. And he has given a new understanding of the problem. And his book, which I mentioned just now, his first book, that is The Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, examines the incommensurability thesis, which can be drawn from disciplines like history and anthropology. It is inevitable that different cultures or different historical situations act on different assumptions. I would like to quote him. It is a lengthy quotation. Please bear with me. I quote, "If there is no such common ground, all we can do is to show how the other side looks from our point of view. That is, all we can do is be hermeneutic about the opposition, trying to show how the odd and the paradoxical or offensive things they say hang together with the rest of what they want to say and how they say looks when put in our alternative idiom," unquote. So this quotation very clearly shows that he believes that the notion of incommensurability is nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. This is what he says. Now, Richard Rorty can be analyzed or examined from the standpoint of epistemology, because he has made a substantial contribution to epistemology by criticizing the traditional epistemology, and also to realism, solidarity, democratic hermeneutics, and philosophy. And what is very important or most important is that he is against the foundationalist way of approaching philosophy, or the foundationalist way of doing philosophy. So one can say there is an anti-foundationalism and a new pragmatism. These are the two concepts which he has been operating most of his writings or most of his life, that is anti-foundationalism and new pragmatism. They dominated his writings. And this anti-foundationalist tradition is represented by him, not only by Richard Rorty, but also there are thinkers like Stanley Fish, for example, Stephen Kemp, Lyotard, and others. For them, there are no perennial, this is very important, there is no perennial and eternal problems. Rorty is against traditional conception of knowledge, where mind has been given primary importance in philosophy. In fact, in the Philosophy and Mirror of Nature, he says, philosophers have been polishing the mirror of mind all the time so that they can have the better vision of themselves. So according to him, that philosophers have been talking about the mind from the time of Plato. All the time, the concept of mind has been playing a very important role. Rorty has rejected this notion of mind, or giving primary importance to mind, since he believed that the social practice is more important. So he has requested the philosophers to turn away from the concept of mind, or he says, don't give primary importance to mind, but let us concentrate on the social practices. So in all his writings, he has been explaining the notion of truth, objectivity, etc. In fact, he is in the BBC interview, in one of the BBC interviews he gave, they gave the title, "The Man Who Killed the Truth." That is the definition, and that is the title they gave. So his approach towards truth or objectivity is something novel, because he wanted to understand the concept of truth as well as objectivity in terms of social practice and relevance of it through conversation. So this is very important. Conversation has been playing a very dominant role in all his writing. So he said, instead of searching for a fixed structure which is based on foundation, because this is how philosophy has been playing its role. foundational principles. So he says instead of searching for some fixed structures based on foundation, he is depending on the mode of conversation. So he said social community is more important than the foundational principles. And in his another important book, Achieving Our Country, he talks about the promises and the failures of American culture. So he is against the traditional epistemology while developing the notion of truth. For example, he says Putnam, for example, depends on the correspondence relation and reference. Correspondence relation and the notion of reference. There is no place for correspondence relation in Richard Rorty's concept of truth. In fact, all of us know the traditional conception of truth has been replaced by the so-called modern theories of truth, like Ramsey's theory or redundancy theory and other theories, semantic theory and all that one. So all of us know that there is something basically wrong with our understanding of a traditional concept of truth. So with regard to the notion of reference that is employed in truth, Richard Rorty would say that the conversational reference should play a dominant role. So this means we have to take into account, according to him, the social factors alone. And the social factors play a dominant role in shaping the meaning of something. So one can read his philosophical approach under three heads. One is the anti-foundationalist and the anti-representationalist approach. And secondly, truth for the community. And thirdly, the ethnocentric, the worldview. Now, Rorty criticizes, this is a very important point, Rorty criticizes the way in which philosophy is understood in Anglo-American philosophy departments. Especially he came heavily on the way in which philosophy departments are functioning, especially in America. In fact, somebody told me, because I have not read that, so I don't want to say that I have seen that quotation, but somebody quoted him by saying that according to Rorty, that all philosophy departments in America should be closed down for the main reason that they don't have a direct contact with people. So though I have not read this from any of his writings, my friend who has been working on Richard Rorty in the USA long back told me that he had a very poor view of the American philosophy departments because they are not connected to people. So Richard Rorty is against the way in which philosophers trying to examine the philosophical problems such as knowledge, mind-body problem, etc. So he gives an alternate. What is that? He says that we should develop we should understand the problems of philosophy from the therapeutic standpoint. In fact, he calls himself as a therapeutic philosopher for the main reason that instead of discussing problems at the theoretical level, philosophers should work for the solution, or they must be in a position to solve the problem. So this means for him, philosophical problems are not perennial problems, and the traditional epistemology, which he was criticizing, he says it is based on the analysis of form or ideas or essences, and we know the concept of essence has been a dominating point in philosophical discourse from the time of Plato. So he's one who has rejected all this. And in one of his important works published in 1991, which I mentioned just now, that is Objectivity, Relativism and Truth. This is a very important book, wherein he says there is nothing wrong with science. Now, one of the basic problem is that he shows the opposition that exists between philosophy on the one side and science on the other. And he says, unfortunately, most of us think that science is something very important, or it occupies the apex. That is, it is considered as a topmost important discipline. But he, like Husserl, no, the crisis of European sciences, if you read, you would find out that how the scientific discipline, or science as a discipline, has spoiled the approach of the philosophers. That is, scientific approach cannot give solution to the problem. This is what Husserl is talking about in the crisis of European sciences, but I am not discussing that. What I'm trying to say is, I'm showing the parallels. Now, in this book, Objectivity, Truth, Relativism and Truth, Richard Rorty says, there is nothing wrong in celebrating science. He says, there is nothing wrong in celebrating science. There is something wrong, he says, when somebody makes an attempt to divinize it. So what Rorty is suggesting is that instead of the scientific method, which is very much prevalent in science, we shall follow the hermeneutic method, which will allow the participational discourse and understanding. And similarly, in another book published in 1989, that is Contingency, Irony and Solidarity, he claims that human solidarity would be seen as the imaginative ability to see strange people as fellow sufferers. So he says solidarity is created. His well-known phrase is, his well-known phrase is this: solidarity is created. So it is created by increasing our sensibility to the particular details of the pain and humiliations of the other, unfamiliar sort of people. So it is nothing but, how do we create solidarity? We can create solidarity by taking into account the pain and sufferings of the other. No doubt, Richard Rorty admits this is limited with a particular language community. Here I would like to say one of the very important contemporary thinkers, that is continental thinker, that is Levinas, for example, has also pointed out that we have to take into account the concept of the other. So in the entire discourse of the contemporary continental philosophy, you can see the significance of the other. And in Richard Rorty also, you see the role of the other. He says that solidarity can be created by involving the other or by celebrating the other. So solidarity, according to him, cannot be grounded or justified in any metaphorical consideration. He says whether it is universal or local, solidarity, he says, is a useful notion. So it is very much essential for people who work for the other, who take into account the values of the other. They will try to create the solidarity. In the scientific objectivity, he says, it is here, he shows how he juxtaposes solidarity with objectivity. By objectivity, he means the scientific objectivity, of course. He says the scientific objectivity is a failure. And scientific objectivity, according to him, has made us to believe that natural science is a sort of a false god. Rorty feels that notions such as science, rationality, objectivity, and truth are bound with one another, and it is believed that science is offering the objective truth, and he says this is not so. So he definitely appreciates science, but at the same time, the scientist cannot perform the role of God. So this is one problem which he sees with science or scientific objectivity. Now, there are other important concepts. I'll quickly explain these concepts. Sometimes he is charged that he is a relativist. He's a relativist in the sense that his philosophical discourse is not for all. This is a very important question which has been raised in the context of Rorty, and long back I also written one article to the journal JICPR, and Daya published that. It is said, one can say or one can argue that Richard Rorty would reject the titles like relativist or non-relativist. He says one should try to transcend the philosophical dichotomies. Now, in fact, my good friend Professor Balganpati has also pointed out the problem with regard to the dichotomies. Now, the philosophical dichotomies is something which has been playing a very dominant role from the time of Plato, because there is always a division. There is always a bipolar concepts, and we try to, there is nothing wrong in having bipolar concepts, mind, matter, day, night, culture, nature, man, woman, speech versus writing. There is a lot of philosophical dichotomies. But what happens is, I'm just here quoting Derrida. The problem is, once you have the dichotomies, you try to support one and try to suppress the other. This is a problem. Among the concept mind and body, you try to say that mind is more important than body. With regard to speech versus writing, one would say, for example, Plato would say that speech is more important than writing. So Derrida would say, in another context, that there is nothing wrong in having these dichotomies, but once you have the dichotomies, philosophical dichotomy, we try to support one and suppress the other. This is a basic problem. So, keeping that at the backdrop, Richard Rorty would also say that he is against this sort of bipolar concepts or the philosophical dichotomies. In his well-known work, Truth and Progress, which was published in 1998, he describes himself as cleaning and disposing of what great imaginative pioneers, example, Frege and Mill, Russell and Heidegger, John Dewey and others, have shown to be rubbish, unquote. So during the later part of his life, he wrote on social and moral philosophy. And here I would like to subscribe that his later writing comes very close to the continental philosophical discourse, because it is here he's trying to develop the concept of solidarity in detail. Now, some scholars would say that this concept of solidarity involves ethnocentrism. Of course, ethnocentrism is a very important concept. So let us see how Richard Rorty would analyze that. So, it is very important for us to know how this ethnocentrism is playing a very important role. And as I said in the beginning, that as an anti-foundationalist and anti-representationalist, he says that intersubjectivity is more important than creating some concepts which are not relevant directly for human life. So, Richard Rorty, as an anti-representationalist, talks about the relation between natural science and the rest of culture. He is the one who does not view knowledge as a matter of greeting reality right, but rather as a matter of acquitting of action for the reality. So he's representing, he's an anti-representationalist from the year 1979 onwards. And in this context, he has developed a very important notion, or he has raised this question. Let me put it in this way. He has raised one important question, namely, is truth for the community or for its own sake? I'll repeat, is truth for the community or for its own sake? Now, this question is very important for the main reason that sometimes the notion of truth is understood in its own context. That is truth for truth's sake. That's all. But now Richard Rorty is reversing the whole thing, right? By saying that truth is not for its own sake, but for the entire society or community. So some scholars, he says, are concerned about developing an absolute conception of truth. This is a major problem according to him, because we philosophers always are trying to define everything in terms of absolute. For example, absolute conception of truth or absolute conception of this, that. So he says this has created a lot of problems among philosophers. Now, do we accept such a conception of truth in reality? This is a question which he raises. So following Rorty, I would like to make my approach to Rorty by keeping solidarity at the backdrop. There are two ways, he says, there are two ways by which human beings give meaning to their lives. What is that? One is by telling the story of their contribution to community. This is a desire for solidarity. Here, the community which we are thinking of may be an actual historical one in which we participate, or another actual one distinct in time. So this, he shows, is very important while understanding the notion of solidarity. So what is important here is the relation that exists between one individual and the other. As I said in the beginning, that the notion of other is very important in understanding Richard Rorty. Because in fact, Levinas would say, my existence or my existence or I, the term I, is meaningful provided the other is there. So it is the other who gives meaning to me, that is I. In fact, in Western discourse, of course, in Indian discourse also, Hegel, in Western discourse, if you read Hegel, you would understand that how for him, both the master and the servant, they have their equal responsibility. The master also needs the servant, and the servant also needs the master. So the concept of other has been playing a very important role in Richard Rorty, as in the case of many continental philosophers. I would like to quote one of his beautiful observations, which we find in his well-known book, Objectivity, Relativism and Truth. I quote her, insofar as a person is seeking solidarity, he does not ask about the relation between the practices of the chosen community and something outside the community. Insofar as he seeks objectivity, he distances himself from the actual persons around him, not by thinking of himself as a member of some other real or imaginary group, but rather by attaching himself to something which can be described without reference to any particular human beings, unquote. I'm sorry for this very lengthy quotation, but in this lengthy quotation, it is clear that how the solidarity arises only within the community. But the objectivity is not the case. So the tradition, so he criticizes the Western culture, which is always in search of the truth, the absolutistic conception of truth. And this has done a lot of damage to the concept of solidarity, according to him. So further he says, that the notion of the Western culture, while developing the notion of truth, has identified itself with that of the notion of objectivity. So here he says, truth is for its own sake. Remember, I asked a question whether truth is, he has asked a question whether truth is for its own sake or for the sake of others. So those who ground solidarity, this is a very, very important point. He says, those who ground solidarity in objectivity construe reality as correspondence to reality. On the other hand, he says, the pragmatists who reduce objectivity to solidarity do not depend on metaphysics or epistemological truth. For them, what is good for us to believe. So this means he tries to modify the notion of truth as well as justification. And he says that there is a need for us to work with all. And he says, community, I'm quoting him once again, community makes intersubjective agreement as much as possible. There is a desire to extend the reference of us, us in quotes, as far as we can. So the pragmatist, as one who supports the solidarity, like Richard Rorty, believes that his approach has only an ethical base. This is very important aspect. So the concept of solidarity is rooted in ethics and not on metaphysics or epistemology. So it is very clear from some of his observation that he totally rejects objectivity by showing how the solidarity has got more advantages. He says that the desire for solidarity is connected with the human progress, which will make the human beings perform very many interesting things for the benefit of the society. So he says that the pragmatism is always dominated by the concept of community or solidarity, in which the ethics play a dominant role. Levinas, once again I'm quoting Levinas, who talks about ethics in detail, shows it is the ethical principles which make the human being a real human being. So he does not need, that is, Richard Rorty does not need any metaphysical support or epistemological support in order to explain this notion of solidarity. So he says, it is very much essential for us to have direct access with the community. So this means we must be in a position to talk to our own community. Our community in the sense that people in and around us. And this would help us to know the significance of other. And he says not only the other, but also your own self. So it is very clear from his discussion that he is not supporting any metaphysical, he does not carry, let me use the word, he does not carry any metaphysical baggage or epistemological baggage. What he wants is the community which can play a dominant role in shaping the members. That is, human progress is possible if solidarity is created. Solidarity is created in quotes. So it is created by increasing our sensitivity to particular details of the pain and humiliations of the other, unfamiliar sort of people. This is a very important statement, so I would like to repeat it. It is created, that is, solidarity is created by increasing our sensitivity to the particular details of the pain and the humiliations of the other, right? Unfamiliar sort of people. So it is very clear from this passage that he is a one who is concerned about persons who have been neglected, the marginalized people. right? Here he includes women also, who have been subjugated by the male domination. So he's the one who has a concern for not only the poor, but also for the downtrodden and those who are rejected by the upper community, or the so-called the high caste people or something. Though he has not used the word, we can extend that. So one can say whether now one can ask the question. This is the last question which I would like to discuss, and then I would like to stop. I don't know whether I cross my time. Please bear with me for 5 minutes. Then 5 minutes I'll stop. So whether it is a universal, or he talks about whether he asks the question. Sorry, he asks this question whether solidarity is universal or local. This is a very important question, because whether solidarity could be extended throughout the globe, or whether it can be extended to particular community in the sense in the clan or group. And he says, in this context, he says, whether it is universal or local, solidarity is a useful notion. It is a social ideal insofar as it brings well-intentional people together in a tolerant community. We should not suspect it. And he says, the members of the group are united so that they can perform the role in a better way, which means he's the one who wants to embrace others. So that is the reason why he wants to develop the concept of we. And here he says the concept of we, in quote, is not formed by excluding others. Right? This is a very important point. It is not that no, don't come. You are not included in this group. So the we, the concept of we, he has given an extended form of the we. Like each and every individual he tries to include, though he says that there are certain problem. What is that? In a dialogue, we is not a relation of exclusion, but a condition of communication without which a subsequent perception of difference and others would be impossible. So the concept of we, according to him, is not exclusion, but it is inclusion. So this is something very important, and this is something which has been playing a very important role in the writings of two great thinkers. One is Foucault. For example, Foucault also talks about the notion of we, and he talks about the need and the necessity for what is otherwise known as community formation. And similarly, Habermas is another important thinker who talks about how the solidarity is a universal form, universal approach. And here I would like to say that Richard Rorty is trying to develop the concept of a symmetrical relation between I and you, or I and the other. That is the reason, that's how he says the concept of we can be developed. What is that symmetrical relation? And here I would like to quote Habermas, who also talks about a symmetrical relation. In a symmetrical relation, I and you are identical. I mean, identical in the sense both are equal. Nobody is inferior or nobody is superior. So that symmetrical relation gives me a space to have a dialogue with you. And similarly, you can have a dialogue with me. That is possible, provided there is a symmetrical relation. But this is not what is happening all the time. Because the speaker, for example, or the lecturer in the classroom, he or she takes the upper hand, because he wants to impose his views on the students, and students have to simply listen to that. That's how we are taught. But no, in the concept of we, when we develop a community, according to Rorty as well as Habermas, the necessary condition for we is to develop the ideal speech situation wherein the other can participate. That is possible provided there is a symmetrical relation, equal relation that can exist between the one and the other, that I and you or we. So in this way, we can develop the solidarity. And of course, there are many parallels which one can draw between Foucault and then Gadamer and others, but I am just, avoiding it for the. And last point, I just take 2 or 3 minutes. I'm skipping many points. Now, the last question which I would like to discuss with you, who are our conversational partners? Now, you see, I said that solidarity is very much essential. That is possible, provided we accept the other and provided we develop the concept of we, that's fine. And he also said that conversation is very important. Now, the question that is raised by him is very interesting. Who are our conversational partners, right? This question is raised by him, and he answers this in a beautiful way. In his book, Objectivity, Relativism, and other, the book which I mentioned, in this book, Objectivity, in his reply to one Clifford Geertz, he says the importance of ethnocentrism. Because the Geertz argues that ethnocentrism relegates gaps and asymmetrical relation between the individuals or group. Now, in this context, Richard Rorty is asking this question, who are our conversational partner? Richard Rorty is of the view that the pragmatists tell us that the conversation, which is our primordial duty in order to continue, is very much essential if we pick up some aspects from ethics. For example, care ethics. Ethics of care was pointed out by Professor Balaganapati. So, by rejecting or by transcending the metaphysical or epistemological approach, by following the ethics of care, one can develop the conversation with others. And he says, it is possible provided we are ready to have a dialogue with others. And here you would say that the Socratic method of dialogue is very much essential or very much applicable in the 20th century philosophy. Here I would like to say how our ancient thinkers in the Upanishads, we come across a beautiful dialogue between the Shishya and the Guru, the teacher and the student. All this clearly shows that only by conversation or by having a dialogue, one can understand the other. So Richard Rorty is one who has given a new direction for the concept of we. And finally, I would like to say that, because I not answered the question, who are our conversational partners? With that, I'll conclude. Now, Richard Rorty believes that there is no universal human nature, right? They are not of the same. Human nature differs from one person to another. So the self is a decentered contingency. So he says it is very much essential for us to develop an ethical system which can promote the notion of solidarity. But at the same time, he says we cannot have conversation or we cannot have dialogue with everybody. Now here you see the ethnocentric aspect which he has been emphasizing. Here I would like to say that the ethnocentrism is sometimes misunderstood. But when Richard Rorty talks about ethnocentrism, what he's trying to say is that since we cannot have a dialogue with everybody, like all people, we have to limit our partners. Limit our partners in the sense that since human nature is not on the same, we cannot converse with each and every individual. This means different cultures. This is one example he gives. Different cultures, for example, have different ethics. And there is no one universal ethical system. So this means that it is very difficult for us to converse with everybody throughout the globe. So it is very much necessary for us to develop the universal nature by which we can discuss or we can have a dialogue. And his last statement would be that we cannot step outside limited perspectives. This is a well-known quotation. We cannot step outside limited perspective. So it is very clear that this ethnocentrism has its own limitation, but it cannot be rejected or it cannot be denied, because it is a very prevalent notion even in the 20th and 21st century. So with this, I would like to stop. I'm sorry, I don't know whether I have exceeded my time, but please forgive me if I had exceeded my time. And I am very grateful to Professor Dash and Professor Narayan Rao ji and other friends who were very kind enough to listen to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for the nice lecture. And the members of philosophy family, thank you for introducing Richard Rorty to this family. Maybe many of us have understood you right about Richard Rorty. We have with us Professor Ranjit Ghosh, sir. Well, Alok Chandan sir is there, and he's an expert in cultures, Proj cultures, and all that. Well, Dr. Tandon, welcome, sir. Namaskar, sir. Namaskar. Welcome, sir.
Namaskar. Namaskar, Pannerselvam ji. I was busy, but I thought that I must listen to Professor Pannerselvam, my old friend. Thank you very much for your very good introduction to a thinker who it is not so easy to give in such a short time such a good exposition of a thinker like Richard Rorty. So there must be many questions, but I would just stick to one question. And I think that since you are talking about the continental philosophers, I will go back to Marx. And I will say that the same thing is echoed in his quotation that philosophers till now have interpreted the word in various ways, and the thing is to change it. So the whole idea of this knowledge and this truth for the help of the liberation of the community is there in continental tradition, right from the Marx himself. But the idea of solidarity, I think we should look a bit more closely into this, because when we talk about Marx and his idea of social change, there are solidarities, but this is a solidarity of worker solidarity. And when we come to our situation today, we can see that there are communities based on race, class, religion, and a nation, and these communities are creating solidarities, but these solidarities are antagonistic because of their own interests, and they clash with each other. So how can we think about a human solidarity in Rorty's terms in such a situation? And again, you have talked about the ethnocentrism. That is also one of the big problems today, because we not talk about the culture, we talk about our culture, their culture, and we think in terms of some sort of a what we call binaries, and there is a clash between every culture is thinking in terms of pride and in terms of being the best of the world culture. So and also in continental tradition, when we talk about Levinas, we can also talk about Sartre. We talk about other is hell. So there is a conflict, and how to deal with that type of conflict when the other may. You yourself said that ideal speech situation is not there, conversation is not possible that way. So when the situation is like that, where the individual is having a symmetrical relation with the other, and the communities are fighting against each other. So how can this idea of human solidarity can prevail? That is my question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Alokji, for a very interesting question. It's not one question, but many questions, but it is always interesting and a pleasure to listen to you. Now, yeah, the contribution of the continental philosophers is something really remarkable, and because they talk truth in terms of community. So it is very much essential. And as you correctly said, in the context of Marx, solidarity is nothing but the workers' solidarity. I appreciate that, and it is admitted that this is very much essential in order to have a revolution or a social change. That's all that I agree. But with regard to Rorty, I would like. I mean, you are right, very, very correct by saying that communities are based on, nation and caste, creed, and all kinds of divisions are there. And there is always, as you said, there is a clash among the communities, and which is based on nation or race and all that one. But I would like to remind you that during my talk, I have pointed out that we cannot have a conversation with each and everybody. Why? Because human nature is not allowing us to have a direct contact, because cultures differ, first of all. And depending on the culture, our values, our ethical system, as I pointed out, change. So it depends. Within the particular framework, we can function. And within that particular framework, if we can function in a proper way, that itself would help us. This is what he is trying to say. And another thing is the ethnocentrism has some drawback, no doubt. It is not something which has to be simply thrown away for that reason. But the ethnocentrism is is suggesting that we have a close affinity with our group, with our people. So that here the idea, this is how I understood him. What Richard Rorty is trying to show is that let us first develop this solidarity. His primary aim is to reject the objectivity, and to some extent I would say he has succeeded that. Then after rejecting this objectivity, he is trying to develop the solidarity. In solidarity, we have to unite ourselves. So that is the reason why he is using the concept of we or us. So I and you can participate, we can understand. And the symmetrical, the symmetrical relation. One can question the symmetrical relation. How do I have a symmetrical relation with you? How do I understand my good friend Professor Ranjit Ghosh? There may not be common agreement. So it is very difficult to have a symmetrical relation. But what is important is that these thinkers, including Richard Rorty and Habermas, they are trying to develop an idealistic conception of society wherein all this can happen. So this is an attempt, that's all. We can't say that, the solidarity which Richard Rorty is prescribing is something which can solve all the problem. His aim is to let us, since we are all separated by culture, different culture and different ways of understanding different ethics, because there is nothing called transpersonal ethics, though we are trying to develop the transpersonal ethics. So it is very much, we have to appreciate Richard Rorty for making an attempt in this direction. This is what I would like to say. Of course, there are certain problems with regard to ethnocentrism, but let us first of all develop this ethnocentrism so that ultimately we can think of one universal, culture, or I don't think, but it is possible to have the universal culture or something, culture which is common to global culture. This is a myth, I would say. So it is, let us develop a community-wise understanding so that perhaps we can change. We can try for a change. We can make an attempt in this direction. So in this way, we have to take Richard Rorty. This is what my understanding goes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. As I could get you from the response that solidarity for Richard Rorty somehow assumes a sort of transition, ethical transition from I to we, so that there can be a dialogue, so that there can be a mutual understanding for resolution of whatsoever conflicts that there are, what are problems that we encounter. So what is important is the transition from I to we, and that would serve as the basis. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Well, we have with us Dr. Ghosh. Sir, please, sir, your observation, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. It is always enlightening to hear from Professor Pannerselvam, who speaks with very clarity. And he has taken us to a domain where I find a semblance with the first speaker. Because when we are talking about we are rejecting the binary epistemology, then the domain of tertiary becomes important. So that domain is actually gives us a wide canvas of everything, the tertiary domain. So in this connection, yes, when Professor Tandon was making reference to Marx, what I find that in case of Marx, we can find that Marx makes an appeal for the workers' solidarity, that the workers of the world unite, you have to free yourself from the chain. So that is an appeal. But here in Rorty, we find a domain that where he's giving us a positive, giving us a plan for the inclusive solidarity. That is what we are getting from him. And as Professor Selvam has already mentioned, that Professor Rorty was very much disgusted with the American, another philosopher whom we can name is Professor Noam Chomsky. He is also against the American way of learning and teaching. So it is not very surprising that Professor Rorty has shifted from the scientism to the way in which the continental philosophers have explained the things. But the most important thing what Professor Selvam has made reference, that is very important in the current day scenario, that is national pride and personal pride. And the entire world is now suffering because of this excessive national pride and individual pride of the leaders, and Russia-Ukraine war and NATO from the behind. All these things what we find is just it is just the exposition of this conflict of national pride and personal pride, which Professor Rorty was trying to make a balance. So these three observations I had to make, but there is a link obviously between the first speaker and yourself. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Rajitji, for your wonderful remarks. Yeah, there are certain parallels which one can draw between my lecture and my good friend Professor Balaganapathi's lecture, because one point which is very similar is that how Professor Balaganapathi has also rejected this the bipolar concept, binary, and that is one place I think from there we can understand any philosophical methodology or any philosophical approach which unfortunately is based on this category. That's one thing. And secondly, you have very rightly pointed out that the plan for the inclusion of the other, because this is not what is happening. So here, that also was pointed out by Professor Balaganapathi, the concept of the other. Now, in Richard Rorty, it is very evident that how the inclusion of the other, the inclusion of the person who is separated from me, has to be included in my fold or in my group. And that is very much highlighted by because somebody would say that the question of in the Western context, always we talk about I and thou. But in Indian context, this question will not arise. Professor Bhatt used to say this. That's a very beautiful point. He said in Indian context, we can always talk about we concept. It is not I and you. Because the we means that that division does not arise. This is a very significant point which Professor Bhatt told me long back. I felt that when I was reading Richard Rorty, I felt that the concept of we, which he is trying to develop by including the other, is very much available in Indian tradition. Unfortunately, these people, these Westerners, are not reading our school of thought. That is one drawback, I would say. And finally, that national, I am very happy that you could say something on that quotation which I mentioned first. That is the national pride and the individual pride. That is a very, very beautiful point which Richard Rorty has said, because it has created that. He said national pride is something similar to self-respect. One cannot have too much self-respect, or one cannot have too much national pride. This has created a lot of problem. And thank you for exhibiting that in a very beautiful way. And I'm very happy that you caught that point in a very beautiful way, that national pride and individual pride. Because in the beginning I said, but I thought somebody might have missed that, but you highlighted that, which I think is a very beautiful quotation from Richard Rorty. Thank you for highlighting that. Thank you, Professor Ranjitji.
Thank you, sir. Another, you must have heard about that African concept, Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Ubuntu is not I but we.
Yeah.
It is very much similar to our Indian ethos.
Correct. Correct, sir.
Ubuntu. Thank you.
Thank
you, Dr. Ghosh and Professor Pannerselvam, sir. Well, we have with us Srinivasan Krishnamurthy, sir. He wants to say something. Welcome, sir.
Well, it was a wonderful presentation, and I am just a mouse in front of a giant. So I have nothing more to say than ask for his clarification about something which has occurred to my mind as Professor looked at, and also said the same thing about the worker solidarity. Is something which triggered my mind to ask whether Rorty, speaking about the philosophy department against, at the same time, his idealism, his pragmatism, and solidarity aspect, his explanation about the truth do make me to think or inform that he was a rationalist come a radicalist. At the same time, I felt that he was a little bit communist in his feelings. I do not know whether he was very successful in his life or not. This is my doubt, sir. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan, for your wonderful question. Now when Rorty felt, as far as I know, the way in which we have been philosophizing some of the concepts like truth and objectivity is knowledge, belief, mind are always problematic. And we can understand his situation because from the time of Plato, in fact, Derrida also criticizes this. From the time of Plato onwards, we have been talking about the mind, thinking that there is some nucleus principle and all other concepts go around that. So whether it is mind or consciousness or this or that we always keep one principle at the center, and then we try to discuss all other problems. So that is the reason why Derrida has to say that there is no such center. Break that center. So that was a need of the hour, I would say. That is from the 20th century philosophy is something remarkable for the main reason that they could revisit some of our ancient philosophical thought. Of course, they are very good, very great and all that one, but at the same time, that a method of philosophizing, a new method of philosophizing has to emerge. That is possible provided you see how the society is related to philosophy, how social values are related to philosophy, not that something which is abstract you are discussing all the time. That is the reason why he is trying to develop the human solidarity or the communitarian philosophy, something like that. Where community is exhibited or community is celebrated. But we have to take into account the 20th century philosophy has also allowed us to have a dialogue. What is that? He says, I forgot to quote that. He says, philosophy is edifying discourse. Right? There is no perennial problems in philosophy. Philosophy is edifying discourse. Now, in an edifying discourse, there is always a participation. But this is unfortunately was not happening in Western tradition, except the Greek tradition in the West and the Indian tradition, of course, the Upanishadic tradition. Apart from these two great traditions, we don't find this edifying discourse or the participational philosophical discourse, which is completely absent. That is the reason why Richard Rorty as well as Derrida and others have criticized this methodology. So what we need is conversation. Now, I would like to say the definition of philosophy is changed now. Once we define philosophy by saying it is a love of knowledge or wisdom, then when Wittgenstein came to the philosophical scene, he said philosophy is nothing but critique of language. But now we have changed that. What is that? Philosophy is nothing but a discourse, participation. What is my role in reading something, in listening something? So this participation is something, conversation. I must have a dialogue with the author, or I must have a dialogue with the text. So a new method of understanding has developed because of the great movements like phenomenology, hermeneutics, and postmodernism, and other important methodologies. So Rorty is giving a direction, that's all. And whether he is fully acceptable or not, that is a different question altogether. But what I'm trying to say is, here is a method, some new method, which is available. So let us try to experiment that. We may not accept that in Indian situation, that's fine. But at least we can show his the limitation of his method.
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Professor.
In any case, do you find that Rorty is using this concept of social hope for establishing this social hope? He is taking side with pragmatism, the will to believe. That means unless we be a philosopher of pragmatism, we cannot just push on the idea of social hope. Do you think that is the direction?
Actually, thank you, Ranjit Ji, Professor Ranjit Ji. Now, one important book which I mentioned, remember, is Philosophy and Social Hope. I think that is his last book, I'm not sure. But it's a very small book wherein he gives how philosophy can serve the purpose of the society. How philosophy can guide the human society. This I think is very, very essential. Right? That is the reason why he wants to show the limitation of the metaphysics or epistemology. Of course, both are very much essential. But let us work for the human society. It is a high time for us to read our own tradition, all that is fine. But at the same time, while reading in Indian context, I'm saying, while reading our own tradition, we can see how this could be used in a larger context. For example, there are issues concerning the human society, whether it is environmentalism or feminism or suppression of women, or the neglect of the Dalits. So all this, the tribal people, all these have to be discussed by philosophers. I would like to quote here long back, some 20 years ago, I'm told, perhaps you know that, when there was a very big environmental crisis in West Bengal, there was in one journal, one article appeared, it seems. I don't remember the journal name or the author. The title of that article is, "Where are the philosophers when we need them?" Because no, philosophers are the persons who can give a direction to the government. That is the reason why in many Western countries, because I was part of a UNESCO project, wherein it is suggested that philosophers should play a major role in policy decision. So this is very much essential. In fact, in many of the Western countries, they are doing that. Philosophers should play a role in policy making. So it is very much essential for philosophers to participate in social problems. He cannot shut his eyes by saying that I am a philosopher, I can only sit in ivory tower and talk something philosophy which nobody can understand. No, I don't believe in such a philosophy. And why I am fond of Rorty or Derrida or any other postmodern thinkers is they are directly connected to human society. Social problems are. If you are not going to talk about society, what else we are going to do? This is I may be wrong, but this is what I am doing and I will be doing forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your response. Well, we have with us Anurima Bhattacharya, madam, since he wants to say something.
Yes, sir. I'm Anurima Bhattacharya from North Bengal University, sir. Good evening, sir. Sir, I have a question, firstly to you and secondly to both of you. Okay, firstly, I want to address Pannerselvam, sir, that when solidarity is the goal and conversation is the measure, and we talk of this accepting of differences, accepting of cultural differences, do I actually mean solidarity as the goal? I mean, when I'm not breaking the barriers, when I'm not breaking the differences, when I'm not using this conversation really to break the barriers, so how do I really aim at solidarity in the real sense? To be sincere in my aim and making conversation as a method or as a measure to move towards solidarity. This is the first question. Secondly, sir, again, considering the rejection of binaries and the rejection of this bipolars, as both of you were saying, when I'm accepting the binaries and the bipolars, does it mean that I'm accepting the contradiction? I can very well accept the binaries in the way of, you said that I have to know the I or we with respect to others. This is also sort of binaries. This is also sort of bipolar, as I understand. So it is not necessary that the binaries have to be opposites. The binaries have to be contradiction. So by way of accepting others in order to know the self, I'm also in a way accepting by bipolars or binaries. Okay, and when Balaganapati sir said of the middle path of Buddhism, how do I know the middle path when I don't consider the two extremes? There is no other way of knowing the middle path if I don't consider the extremes. There is no way of knowing the other options if I don't consider the two extremes. So is rejecting the bipolars a solution? I mean, why can't we accept the bipolars and also move forward with considering some other alternatives? These are the two questions.
Yes, Professor Balaganapati sir for the second question and Pannerselvam sir for the first one. Yes. Yes. I don't see Pannerselvam sir. Yes, he is there. Sir, please, sir.
Thank you, Professor Anurima ji, for your wonderful questions. The first question, I have some problem in getting your first question towards the end. I have some problem, but let me try to answer you because now one thing you said is that how in solidarity conversation would take place. If that can you please repeat that first question very briefly?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, surely. I said if solidarity is the goal and conversation is the method, then why is it that we have to get limited within the cultural boundaries? Or we cannot break the boundaries and go beyond the differences? So how does it actually, how does this conversation actually play a role in towards creating this solidarity if we cannot break the differences at all?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you are right. Solidarity, let us say, solidarity is the goal and the conversation or dialogue is a method. Now, the question now, when I was talking about this, I made a reference to the ethnocentrism. Because also I pointed out that who are our conversational partners? This is a very important question raised by Richard Rorty, because he already told us that we cannot have conversation with everybody. So there is some limitation. What is that limitation? As I said in my lecture, that human nature is different, the culture is different, and the traditions are different. There are certain difficulties. So we cannot understand each and every person. There is some limitation, cultural difference. So the best way is to have a dialogue with the community. The community in the sense that a group of people with whom we can easily converse. A group of people with whom we can have a dialogue. So this is the only way by which we can develop our solidarity. Of course, as I said in my talk, that he was charged with this notion of ethnocentrism, because he's talking about a community, a particular group. But that has to be seen from a different perspective. That is, once we develop this solidarity among a particular group, then we can have another group. Similarly, we can collect number of community groups by which the solidarity throughout the globe could be. I don't know. He has not said anything about that. That's one thing. And secondly, the ethnocentrism has certain difficulties, no doubt. But that is the only way. We have to understand that. I would like to quote here one example, because the Westerners are very, little, I don't want to use the word problematic, but they always feel that we Indians cannot understand a Western philosophical tradition, for example. Why I'm saying is to show the cultural difference according to them. They say, when I made a presentation in a conference, the person, a German philosopher, Herbert Herring, you must be knowing, he got up and said, do you know, German? I said, unfortunately, no. Then he said, you cannot understand Wittgenstein. So you see how the culture, his argument is that we are culturally different, right? Our way of understanding a particular concept is different from that of yours. So he said, you cannot understand our culture. So then I said, you can never understand Indian culture. So what I'm trying to say is, there are cultural differences, then there is racial differences, then so many differences are bad. But what Rorty is trying to say is that let us try to develop a solidarity in which, say, a small group, let us start with a small group, where we can have conversation. This is very important. The means are very important. The method is very important. So that perhaps, because this he has not said, perhaps at a later period, we may try to have a bigger group or a community group where all of us can participate. This is one attempt he has made. And secondly, the binaries. Now, when we say binaries, there is nothing, as I said, there is nothing wrong in admitting binaries. It is very much essential for us to have binaries, and it is inevitable also. When day is there, then night would also follow that. So mind is there, matter. But the problem is, you try to, there may be many contradictions between these two. There are the very fact that they are binaries would clearly show that there is a contradiction between one and the other. But the problem is, once you have these binaries, you try to show that one is better than the other. That is the problem. Now I quote one example from Plato. Plato, in his well-known dialogue, Phaedrus, where he says, the return words are like orphans. I'm quoting him, the returned words are like orphans. They don't have somebody to protect their words. They are orphans, he says. Whereas the written word and the spoken words is, according to him, is more acceptable for the main reason that the author or the speaker is there to immediately answer that. So it is very clear, no? When speech versus writing is suppressed or considered to be inferior than speaking. So this is what is happening in philosophy. We consider mind is superior, whereas matter is inferior. So these binary concepts have been playing a very dominant role. It has to be there, but don't try to say, Derrida would say, don't try to say that one is superior than the other. And this has created a lot of problems. It is very much available in the entire Western philosophical discourse. That is the reason why many of the continental thinkers have, criticized this approach. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Pannerselvam. Well, it is 9:15 now. Well, many people would like to take this concept discussion it, but we don't find time. It's already 9:15. Well, our host and the admin, Professor Pramutma Das. Well, I would like to hear a line or two from him on the talk of Professor Pannerselvam before we wind up the session.
Oh, I thought I have to respond to the second question. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, sir. Welcome, sir. Welcome. Yes, if you want to respond to the second question. Yes, sir. Yes, welcome.
Just one point, because this is very important. The binary. As Professor Pannerselvam has pointed out, this binary is not an innocent one. Binary epistemology, in fact, tells that one is better than the other, as Professor Pannerselvam has pointed out. The other one is there are only two. That is the major problem. Because it is not that there are only two, there are many. Okay. So once you think that there are only two, then you are categorizing everything into two, and also you are putting one against the other. That is the problem. The contradiction when you talk about, you're saying that one is the absence of the other. That is how you start understanding. And the implications of this binary epistemology are devastating on the cultures itself, civilizations itself. Let me explain it this way. How do we teach our young children about these binaries? Inculcate them into their brains. We tell them that there is a boy, and what is the opposite of boy? Girl. What is the opposite of feminine? Masculine. And then you might say that, what is the problem with this? This is true. But actually, this is not true. As per the Indian tradition, these are not opposites. They have to come together. They are complementary to each other. And complementariness is the one which makes them produce the new thing. Okay. For example, air and fire, water and fire, these are not opposites to us. These are basic elements, and the combination of which produces something new. Instead, you tell them that these are opposites. And then what kind of a society do you anticipate when you say that boy and girl are opposites, and you also teach them how to deal with an opponent from the childhood onwards? So we nurture our tender minds with this binary epistemology, and you would only see a violent kind of a civilization, not a complementary kind of a civilization, where the kind of solidarity that Professor Pannerselvam in terms of Rorty'S thought is advocating. That is the major problem. That is why we have to know it. I agree with you that we have to know the binary epistemology. We have to transcend it. That is important. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Balganpati. Well, the good take from your the last session is that the opposites are not contradictory, rather they are complementary to one another. They support each other. That would be a great take. Okay,
it is a cultural perspective. One culture tells you that these are complementary. Other culture tells you that these are opposites. That is the basic problem.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Well,
it is so because culture never goes by logic. Culture goes with practice. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, everybody. Now, Professor Das, a line or two on this.
Yes. Again, I appreciate Professor Pannerselvam, sir. very honestly he advocated. I think that every philosophy teacher is an advocate. When we are teaching Descartes' philosophy, we should feel that I am Descartes. When I am teaching Immanuel Kant, I should justify the philosophy of Immanuel Kant as an advocate of Immanuel Kant, and very bona fide advocate of Immanuel Kant. My thought may be equal with some others, great philosophers' thought. But when I am teaching the philosophy of a philosopher who is not of my interest, who may not be of my interest, but when I am talking about that philosophy of that philosopher, I should justify. I should fight to the last. Okay, so this is the beauty in discourse. It, otherwise, we are just saying for the sake of saying. But there is a difference between philosophy and philosophy of philosophy. As we are discussing about philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, philosophy of many things. Similarly, we should be aware of the fact that there is philosophy of philosophy. So, in both Indian and Western traditions, there is only one system who has given importance upon philosophy of a philosophy, that is Jaina system. Jaina system says that philosophy is only a view from a perspective, and every perspective should be respected because no perspective is the final perspective. So whatever Richard Rorty is claiming, that may be contrasted, but that may not go parallel with other philosophers, but that is one perspective, and we have to respect that perspective. Otherwise, as sir said, there will be suppression. That this is impressed and that is suppressed. So that should not be in philosophy. So philosophy of a philosophy means we have to respect all the perspectives. Yes, this is Descartes' perspective. This is Spinozistic perspective. This is Leibniz perspective. We have to if we are really a philosopher, if we have that spirit, we should take the perspective as a perspective. So that is the real spirit of going against absolutism. Okay, so this is the point. So one thing I shall speak. Every philosopher has his own ideology and methodology. Every philosopher has his own ideology and methodology. According to the language of Immanuel Kant, that may be the format of a philosopher, as the categories of understanding. Similarly, a philosopher can't speak going beyond his own format. That is what is his ideology and what is his methodology. So when we are speaking about a philosopher, we should focus on one thing, that what is the intention of that philosopher, what he intends to say, and in which geographic. I appreciate the questions asked by Madam Bhattacharya. She asked a very beautiful question, that if the intention of a philosopher is to make philosophy concerned for a community, concerned for a society, concerned for a culture, then it cannot justify the cultural diversities, because which society? The question will come, which society? Societies are many. We can't say that Indian society is equal to American society. We can say that Indian culture is equal to American culture. So when one philosopher is intending to focus his philosophy on a particular community, particular society, there he intends to solve the crisis, the problems relating to that community, that society, which may vary from other communities and other societies. Therefore, every society has its own value, has its own limitations, has its own customs, has its own dignity. So, and has its own limitation also. So, when we are speaking about a particular society, particular culture, particular nationality, we should take that philosophy from that perspective only. For example, Karl Marx. for example, all existential philosophers, they focus on one aspect of human life, that is the problem of existence. So pragmatism is another school. So there are different schools from different perspectives. So a philosopher should transcend from all perspectives, because that is the beauty in philosophy. Don't go by any brand. Don't spoil your whole life with one brand and don't advocate that. For philosophical debate, it's all right, but we should be open and we should take a perspective as a perspective. Anyway, as an advocate, as a teacher, we should justify this philosopher which is intended for teaching or talking. That is very nicely done by Professor Pannerselvam ji. It is wonderful because we spent 3 hours in philosophical discourse and the topics were different to each other, but we don't feel the difference. We feel as if we are united. The perspectives are different, but that we transcend that perspective. Therefore, we could spend 3 hours without tiredness. So this is philosophy, and we should have that spirit. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Das, for your observations. Now, I request Dr. Kailash Mahana, sir, for proposing a vote of thanks. Dr. Mahanana. Dr. Mahanana. Well, anyway, Dr. Mahana, maybe he's busy as well. But well, anyway, so it's a very good evening for all of us because, as Professor Das said, we have spent 3 hours, but there is no tiredness, as you could see on the face of Professor Pannerselvam on screen. You see, at this age, still he's smiling, spending 3 hours. So that's the spirit. Okay, so I'm really thankful to Professor Pannerselvam sir for spending 3 hours without showing any sort of tiredness. If we give still more time, and I think he's ready to answer still more questions. So that is the greatness, and I'm so thankful. Philosophy family is very much thankful to him for his presence, for his responses, and we learned a lot from him. And now moving to Professor Bal Ganapati sir, well, I should thank him for the originality that he has brought in. Health, we know that, but philosophical health is a new kindness, is something new. It is not that it is now getting limited to a certain section. Now this very kindness is original that I could see. So when we come with certain some certain framing of certain things, philosophical health. So it's a new kindness. Well, I think it would reach greater heights. And as you said that he's writing for some publication with Oxford University Press. Now I think this very coinage would be taking India, I say, to greater heights. And for this effort, I really thank him. And he has initiated this effort in Philosophy Family. I should doubly thank him for coming to Philosophy Family and talking on philosophy health. So, the philosophical health. Now, I would request him to deliver more lectures on philosophical health while framing out his paper, developing his ideas. So, I request him to appear once more in this family to discuss his ideas. So, I should thank him a lot. Now, I should thank Dr. Ranjit Ghosh sir, who is the man behind initiating discussions. Not today, every time he attends the Philosophy Family's webinars, and today too. He takes beautiful questions and that brings in a lot of discussion, and I should thank him for that. And also I should thank the other participants, Srinivasan Krishnamurthy sir. Also, he also raises beautiful questions. I should thank him for his presence at that age. So age also matters. It's not that you discuss, but age also matters because you have other problems to deal, but you forget the problems and you concentrate on the issue, and that is all about this family. And we are greatly thankful to the speakers and the participants. And I should also thank Anuruma Bhattacharya for her contribution, for her presence, for her questions, and also our admin and host, Professor Pramod Kumar Das, for his observation, beautiful observations, I should say, and all those who participated and raised beautiful questions in this webinar. So I don't find words to how to thank them. But only thing I could say that, please, sirs, you are always welcome to this family. And whenever you feel that you have some time for us, please do just give one message that you are going to deliver another lecture. Would be very happy to see you again in this platform. And it's a great learning. It's a great experience for all of us. And I should thank at the last Professor Pramod Kumar Das for initiating this everything, for making this webinar possible. So I think I have not forgotten anybody. I think I should thank others who participated in this webinar and made this webinar so successful. So thanking all, I should say, let us move to Professor Das for declaring this meeting closed. So
Professor Alok Tandon.
Alok Tandon, sir. Yes, Alok Tandon, sir. So he raised a very beautiful question on solidarity, making a reference to communism and Marxian ideas, where preference is given to the working class, and that too has also raised a beautiful discussion on the issue. And thank you everybody, and especially the speakers and the question answers for making this webinar so successful. And I think the senior professors would be helping us, would be blessing us for coming up with better versions in this family. So thanking all, let us move to Professor Das for declaring this meeting closed.
Yes. Now we shall close this meeting. We are grateful to both the speakers. Sir, please have next topic with us. We shall discuss. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Now the meeting is closed.